Hi everybody, welcome to this month's calligraphy techniques video. Today we're going to be going over how to use a pen and ink and how to add some flourishes to your calligraphy. First, let's see what you'll need. You're going to need a pencil, some black paper, you'll also need some ink. I'm using Speedball ink in gold and silver. Then you'll need a calligraphy pen. A calligraphy pen is a little bit different than a regular pen because it has two parts, the pen and the nib. You can see that the nib has a little hole in it called a well. The way to assemble it is to just place the nib at the top of the pen and make sure that it's secure. Here are a couple tips for using pen and ink. It's kind of a tricky medium, so you'll want to keep some scrap paper nearby. That way you can practice on the scrap paper, and you can also tap the pen onto the paper to make sure that any big blobs of ink come out on the scratch paper and not on your project. Another tip is to fully immerse the nib into the ink. This way the well will be filled and you'll be able to use it a little bit longer without having to re-dip. The final tip is to practice. Pen and ink is kind of a tricky medium, and you'll want to get used to the way that the ink flows and the way that the pen writes on the paper, because it's very different than other mediums that we've used before. So now that you have all your materials together, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is to practice with pencil. So when you work with pencil, it's really nice because it's easy to erase and it allows you to develop the muscle memory that's required for using flourishes. I've actually practiced the names that I've written here dozens of times before I even started to work with the ink. I really wanted to make sure that I had that muscle memory down so that when I go into the ink, I am happy with the way that it turns out. Because you can't erase the ink and every little mistake is visible, so you want to make sure that you're really happy with the way that your calligraphy looks when you're using the pencil. So now I'm going to be starting with the first name, Olivia. So to start out this name, I'm actually going to start with the first part of the flourish that begins before the O. So when you're adding flourishes, you might not write the name in one continuous go. I started with the O, then I added the flourish for the L, and then continued writing the name. I finally added a flourish at the end of the A, and then at the bottom of the name. Okay, let's move on to the next name, Madeline. For this name, I decided to start with a really big flourish at the beginning. Now you'll see here that I start the beginning of the D, but then I start to add the flourish at the top before moving on to the rest of the word. So finally on the E, I'm going to add another flourish at the end and bring it around the top and the bottom to make sure that it looks balanced. Okay, now we're going to move on to the final name, Jordan. So to start out this name, I'm going to start with the flourish at the beginning, which is kind of like a little line. Then I'm adding a little flourish to the J, and then I'm connecting the O. For the R, I'm going to bring it down farther for the little flourish there. And then I'm going to start the D by adding the flourish to the top and then completing the letter. Now finally with the N, I'm going to add the final little flourish. And then you're all done with the names. Alright, now finally I'm going to move on to a little phrase that I think would be nice to use flourishes with, and to just kind of use the gold and silver together. So I'm starting out with the word sun and adding a tiny flourish to the S and the U, and then a little bit of a bigger flourish to the N. I'm also adding kind of like a flourish or an accent on the outside to kind of mimic sun rays. Next I'm going in with the silver ink, and I'm adding a little banner flourish above the sun. I like to switch up the different fonts that I use within calligraphy just to add a little bit more interest to the overall piece. So I'm going to have this banner kind of wrap around throughout the design. So I'm bringing it again underneath the word sun, and now I'm moving on to the word moon. You can kind of see that I was struggling a little bit with the tips and the ink here, and that I have to keep going back and refilling my nib. So I would suggest to use a high quality pen and ink. That way you won't have to struggle as much as I did. Now I'm going back in with the gold to add the word stars. You can kind of see at the beginning that I got a little bit of a blob of ink. I didn't mind the way that it looked, so I kept it. But if you want to prevent this from happening, it's a good idea to tap your pen on some scrap paper before you start. So then I made the A in stars a little bit of a star itself, added a little bit of dots around the stars, finished up the banner, and then you're all done with this one as well. Thank you for watching this month's calligraphy techniques video. I hope it helped you learn a little bit more about the pen and ink medium, gave you some ideas on what you would like to do for your own calligraphy, and I hope it gave you some inspiration as well. Be sure to join us next month for some more fun and inspiration. Bye everybody.